Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day 543, September the 9th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in to this Sunday morning edition. Happy Sunday morning. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into today, of course, is this interview that Padadopolous did with Jake Crapper. I don't know that he revealed anything new. And I was actually quite surprised that he did the interview with Crapper. You would think he would do it with Fox or someone like that. I'm sure they've tried to reach him. Not really sure why he went on with Crapper, but he did. So let's go ahead and talk about that, because there's nothing really new that I learned. Just reconfirmed what we already knew, but it was good to hear it coming from Padadopolous instead of other people, or to see it, from text, or to see it from emails, or from the IG report or whatever. It was good to kind of see Padadopolous, because when you watch somebody, you can get a feel for whether or not they're telling the truth. And I think he looked pretty authentic. I think there's still a lot of mystery going on with Padadopolous and other things going on there. And he's not going to volunteer any of that information. He may be have some restrictions as to what he can say because of his agreement with the prosecutor, Uncle Bob the executioner, because again he did plead guilty, and kind of a deal, I guess. So I still don't think we got the full story, but just from the interview, I want to give you the specific, the thing that kind of jumped out at me, the most specific, and in fact I wrote down his actual wording regarding the question by Crapper to Padadopolous regarding Stefan Halper. So I want to focus on that just a little bit here. So Padadopolous doing this interview with Crapper, and he's describing his interactions with Stefan Halper and Milian. So first, let's focus on exactly what he said, word for word, on Halper. So Padadopolous says the following: I receive an unsolicited email from Stefan Halper, who I thought was a Cambridge professor, inviting me. So he reached out to me and said, I want you to write a paper for me on your expertise, which is gas discoveries in Israel and Turkey and Cyprus. I said, of course. I have no issue with that. It was a nice honorarium of $3,000, a free flight to London, a 5-star hotel for at least 2 or 3 days' work. So I joined him for dinner about a week later in London, and over drinks, where all of a sudden he pulls out his phone. Everyone has phones when they meet with me. And he places it in front of him, and he begins to tell me. So George, now this is Halper speaking. So George, hacking is in the interest of your campaign. Of course, the Russians are helping you. These open-ended questions, and of course, you're probably involved in it too. That's correct, right, George? So this was Padadopolous saying to Crapper, that line there, that these were open-ended questions. So you have Halper saying, so George, hacking is in the interest of your campaign. Then Padadopolous says, of course the Russian... No, that's Halper. Halper says, so George, hacking is in the interest of your campaign. Of course the Russians are helping you. Then Padadopolous says, these open-ended questions, and then he pauses, and then he goes back to what Halper was saying, which is, and of course, you're probably involved in it too. That's correct, right, George? So then Padadopolous says, so I told him I have no idea what you're talking about, because of course I had nothing to do with Russian interference or hacking whatsoever. So then he, Halper, begins to sweat. His demeanor changed. He became quite aggressive in his questioning. So this is what Papagopoulos is telling Tapper. So in that one statement, let's break it down just a little bit. First, he says, of course, I received an unsolicited email from Stefan Halper. Now, of course, we know now that it was unsolicited to Papagopoulos, but we know now that Halper had first contacted Mr. Clovis, and he had befriended Clovis and warmed up Clovis a little bit and softened him up to try to get his way into the Papagopoulos world. Okay, so we can clearly see this is a spy, an agent provocateur at work. It's exactly what this shows us. He's setting up his mark. So he receives an unsolicited email from Stefan Halper, who he says, I thought was a Cambridge professor. Why would he think Halper was a Cambridge professor? Probably because Halper introduced himself as a Cambridge professor. But we know that he hangs around in that community, but so I guess you could say he is a Cambridge professor, but it's just the fact that he hangs around that whole Cambridge, society, I guess is what you would call it, which is a society of spies and academics from all over Europe, including Russia. So Papagopoulos says, so he reached out to me and said, I want you to write a paper for me on your expertise, which is gas discoveries in Israel, in Turkey, and Cyprus. Okay, so why would a guy like Stefan Halper, who's been around for a very long time, who's very connected to all these academics and knows many, many people who are oil and energy experts throughout Europe and the United States and probably around the world, why would he reach out to someone like Papagopoulos, who's like 27 years old, is very green about these things, is not very connected probably to a lot of the really high-level intel and information that you would need, not even as connected or as knowledgeable as Carter Page. But he's pumping Papagopoulos up. He's saying, hey, you're a real expert. I really respect your opinion. We really need you to write this paper. Halper is surrounded by academics who write on these very issues. He himself, Halper, probably knows more, or probably has forgotten more about oil and gas issues in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, than Papagopoulos will ever know. So he's buttering Papagopoulos up. He said, hey, you're this great expert, man. You're really sharp. We really want you. And how would Halper know this? How would he even know who Papagopoulos is? He's a low-level campaign volunteer who's not known in any circles as being an expert on anything. This is probably why Halper wanted to talk to Clovis, so that he could obviously use Clovis as an introduction, but probably to get some background on Papagopoulos, so that he could blow smoke up Papagopoulos' ass. So, yeah, boy, I know all about you, Pops. You're quite the legend at 2017. We all know about your experience and your expertise in oil and gas and the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Everyone wants to know what you think, George. And when you write an article, everyone's ears are going to perk up because we all know what an expert you are. Everybody is waiting holding their breath, waiting for this article, George. We really want to know what you think. All these experts and academics who've been studying this issue for years and years want to know what you think, George. And obviously, Papagopoulos, it probably bloated his ego a bit, and he thought, hey, maybe my reputation is better than I thought. Hey, these longtime foreign policy experts and people that hang out with all these academics, with all this experience and all this knowledge and all these contacts, they're interested in what I think. Clearly, another obvious example that Halper was buttering up Papagopoulos, setting up his mark. He was setting him up. So Papadopolous then says, well, I said, of course, I have no issue with that at all. It was a nice honorarium of $3,000, a free flight to London, a 5-star hotel for 2 or 3 days' work. So in addition to buttering up Papadopolous, he's basically pitching him on this really sweet deal. Hey, George, you're going to be treated like a real big shot. We're going to pay you $3,000 for a couple days' work. We're going to pay your plane fare round trip. We're going to put you into a 5-star hotel. Making him an offer he couldn't refuse. I wouldn't refuse that. You offer me $3,000 to go over and write a paper? You're going to put me in a 5-star hotel? Pay my airfare for a little trip to London? I'd do it just for the vacation. Another example, clearly this was Halper putting out the bait. Putting out the bait for Pops. And he was biting. So what happens? They find themselves, Papadopolous bites, he goes to London and finds himself at dinner with the fat man, Mr. Halper, the agent provocateur, placed into the campaign by the FBI, counterintelligence, with his front, his cover, through this agency within the DOD, where he's being paid $1.4 million. So now we have both of our players set. We have our obvious Mark Papadopolous and our obvious agent provocateur, the fat man, Mr. Halper. So then Halper gets to the point of why he really brought Papadopolous there, and Papadopolous now begins to understand. Probably thinking about, at some point it must have dawned on him, why does this heavyweight guy who hangs out with all these academics and all these people, why is he interested in me? At some point that had to cross his mind. So now he finds himself at dinner with Halper, and it wasn't just Halper. His assistant was also with him, and we understand she's attractive. So they're having drinks. And at that point, just totally out of the blue, as Papadopolous describes, he says, out all of a sudden, he pulls out his phone. And then Papadopolous tells us that it seems like everyone that's interested in him pulls out their phone. Everybody wants to get him recorded. They want to record the conversation. And yeah, that would make you kind of skeptical. If I'm having a conversation with somebody, just talking about things, and all of a sudden he pulls out his phone and sets it on the table, I'd be thinking, are you recording this? Why are you recording this? So Papadopolous is obviously looking at the phone and going, he's recording this. I wonder why. So he's starting to get skeptical. So he tells us that everyone pulls out his phone, and then Papadopolous says that he goes right into the following wording, and listen to this wording. So, George, hacking is in the interest of your campaign. So, that had to kind of rattle him a little bit. Because why would he just out of the blue say, so hacking is in the interest of your campaign? Well, Papadopolous at this point thinking, I don't have anything to do with hacking. I'm not a hacker. What do I know about hacking? Who's hacking? And he says, of course, the Russians are helping you. You'd be thinking like, really? Hacking the campaign and the Russians are helping me? Us? The campaign? What are you talking about? This is what's got to be going through his mind. And then he says, of course, Papadopolous says he's getting these open-ended questions. Well, these are not really open-ended questions. I know what he's trying to say, but what these actually are statements of fact. They're accusations. Halper is saying, so George, hacking is in the interest of your campaign. That is a statement of fact. When in fact it's not a fact. But he's making it a fact. Why? Because he's recording. He wants to make it sound as if this has already been an established fact, when it has not been. He was hoping for Papadopolous to go, But Papadopolous did not. He questioned it. because Halper then follows up by saying, and of course, you're probably involved in it too. So these are all assertions and accusations. They're statements of fact, despite the fact that none of the facts that he's asserting have been established in the conversation. He only turns on his phone. In other words, if you look at this, he's only makes these types of statements once he's turned on the phone, with nothing before that, no conversation before that. Because that's probably because he wants to make it appear as if they're having a conversation, and Padadopolous starts talking about these things, so Halper can say, oh yeah, at which point I turned on my phone so I could capture it. Even though there was nothing to preface any of this. Halper is volunteering it in the form of statements, factual statements, and assertions, despite the fact that there's been no statement of facts by Padadopolous or even any conversation about this in this conversation with Halper. These are all just assertions by Halper, which is now throwing Padadopolous a curveball. He's not really sure. Now he's getting skeptical, as you or I would. So Padadopolous says, well, I told him I have no idea what you're talking about. Because, of course, I had nothing to do with Russian interference or hacking whatsoever. And then Padadopolous says, so then he, Halper, began to sweat. Of course, he's the fat man. His demeanor changed. Yes, Padadopolous is screwing with him. He thought he thought he already had him in his hand. And by making statements of fact, and he's paying him, he's got him in his hotel, he thinks he's got Padadopolous now where he wants him. And he's just going to get Padadopolous to and go along with all this. But Padadopolous is not going along with it. He wrestles him on the issue, and we don't know how many drinks they've had. Maybe Halper thought that he had enough alcohol in him that he would very easily go along with the conversation, if for no other reason than just to go along with it, just not to be adversarial, because he doesn't want to compromise this opportunity given to him by Halper. But that's not what Padadopolous does. And he says, of course, Padadopolous says that Halper then became very aggressive in his questioning. Okay, and that's where he ends talking about that. But we know from previous information that it went beyond that. We know that at that point, Halper got very angry when Padadopolous would not play ball. At which point, Halper gets up from the table angrily and leaves abruptly. He leaves, leaving his, what we understand, his attractive assistant with Padadopolous. She probably has a phone too, and is probably also recording. At which point, she has some small talk with Pops. Probably, I would assume she's trying to get a romantic angle going with him. Then she takes him over to the bar, where they sit down and have some more drinks, and I assume that she tries to work her magic. They're running the Boris and Natasha routine on Padadopolous. But by now, he's already spooked. And he's probably understanding exactly what's going on. He's probably not that naive. And this is where it all blew up, and they didn't get what they wanted. And this is why they had to continue other things. This is why they had to call in, and probably why Halper had to call Downer and say, damn, he foiled us. Me and my assistant both. We ran the Boris and Natasha routine on him. We fed him a couple drinks. We buttered him up. We paid him $3,000. We did all this. I thought I had him in the palm of my hand, and the son of a bitch froze up. He froze up. But now he does know about this Russian hacking because I just told him. So what we need is for you to get him to talk to you, to see what he'll say to you. So that's when they brought in Alexander Down the Hatch Downer, who also initiated the contact with Padadopolous through his assistant. Then they have their little meeting, and then that ends up finding its way into FBI counterintelligence, which they then tell us is the reason for the counterintelligence operation, until people started calling into question exactly how this all went down. And then they changed their tune. and then it goes back to the dossier, which has already been discredited. So now, both of their major attempts had failed. They still had the Trump Tower set up. They still had that one in their pocket, holding on to that. The alleged server communicating at Trump Tower with a Russian bank, that got shot down. Caputo and Stone didn't bite on Mr. Greenberg. So you can see there were multiple frame-up operations going on, and you can see that Halper, Downer, and Melion were all in play. They were all part of the play. Now, how much they all knew, we don't know. I'm sure Halper and Downer knew everything. Melion's another issue, which we're about to get to right now. So anyway, it's very interesting when you analyze this and look at what Papadopoulos said to Crapper, that he's pretty much saying what he said. We just get a little bit more detail and we get it directly from Pops. And I believe he's telling the truth when I watched him explain this. So then he starts talking about Melion, and of course he talks about this job offer, which Papadopoulos' wife had mentioned. This high-paying job offer working for this oil and gas company, but the only hook is that Papadopoulos had to be working from within the Trump campaign. Another obvious setup. And we have Melion, according to Papadopoulos, he's saying that Melion told him that he works with Trump on real estate projects. In other words, making it sound like he's a regular pal of Trump and they have this relationship, when in fact they had only met one time back in 2007 when there was a far-fetched proposal to possibly build a Trump Tower in Russia, and Trump looked at the deal and didn't like it. Too much corruption in Russia at the time. Too many issues operating in Russia. Too many people you have to do business with who are too shady. Trump didn't want anything to do with it, obviously. He can build Trump Towers anywhere. And I assume he just didn't like the deal. But that's the history of Melion and Trump. One conversation in 2007 about maybe a Trump Tower in Moscow, which Trump walked away from. That's the extent. So Melion, if what Papadopoulos is saying is true, is what's the word? He's embellishing his relationship with Trump in order to persuade or impress Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos then says that he became suspicious and rejected the offer. Papadopoulos says that he believes now that Melion was working for someone else, but he's not sure who. Of course he was working for someone else. Probably Mr. Halper, who was working for probably Breedlove and Brennan and Peter's been stroking us, who were all part of the multi-agency task force, who were using their agent provocateurs to set up Papadopoulos. He's obviously figuring out that these people who are contacting him out of the blue are all shady characters. And he's probably starting to wonder why everyone's so interested in me. Who the hell am I? I mean, these guys are all introducing themselves with this heavyweight background. They run around with all these high-enders. Papadopoulos has got to be saying, wait a minute, I don't fit into this group. I don't fit into this group. I would like to. I would love to believe this is all true, but why are all these people so interested in me? So, as you can see, this is just more evidence, again, and if you as an investigator, a member of Congress, or a former prosecutor, if you can't look at this and see that these are obvious setups, agent provocateur type activities, setting traps, this is exactly what this is, and this is very, very obvious to me and probably most of you. And I believe that this is the type of details that the average person doesn't know. They don't know. They say, oh, Trump-Russia collusion. Oh, Papadopolous, yeah, he just got sentenced to 14 days. Blah, 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 blah. You'll never get the backstory to any of these details, so that people will never really understand it. All they'll get is a headline. Papadopolous, former Trump campaign aide, sentenced to 14 days, $10,000 fine, $9,500 fine, whatever. You'll never get the backstory, and that's why I'm here. We all know this because we've been covering this for a very long time. So there you go. But you may want to watch that interview with Jake Crapper and Papadopolous. It's nothing really new, but interesting to watch because you actually get to see it coming out of Papadopoulos' mouth. Of course, Jake Crapper didn't draw any connections, connect any dots, and say, wow, sounds to me like, George, like you were set up by an agent provocateur. No, Crapper isn't going there. He played the dummy. Now, you would think it'd be an investigative journalist. He would be very curious and would start saying, you know, Pops, it sounds to me like you were being played, pal. Didn't happen. Let's move on to the next thing. The Democrats, the Demowits, they are now planting spies into the front row of Trump speeches at his rallies. Several of them were removed from the most recent Montana rally. So it looks like they've got a new tactic. They're going to seat their folks, spies, essentially, for the Democratic National Committee, the Democrats, their own version of agent provocateurs. They're going to sit these people down in the front row in front of Trump and have them make crazy faces at him. And that's exactly what they did. And he figured it out. He looked down to the front row and said, why are these people down there? This is unusual. Most people in the front row are really happy. These people are making crazy faces at me. Get him out of here. And of course, once they ran him out, they realized one of them was actually wearing a Socialist for America button. And we know they're being paid by George Soros. The government is now admitting that the sex allegations against Maria Butina are a mistake. Prosecutors are now walking back those claims. She, of course, is this Russian girl who they recently went after to prosecute. They're calling her a Russian spy, that she has somehow infiltrated the NRA, and she was connected to this congressman, and blah, 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 the whole 9 yards. Just another attempted part of the operation, which has never stopped. I mean, this is the continuation of everything that's been going on. They have not stopped. They continue the deep state coup. So my guess is, I don't know what they're going to continue, if they're going to continue to try to prosecute her under the Espionage Act or something, but at least they're admitting now that the sex allegations are not true. So the Daily Caller has now come up with 4 candidates who they think may be the anonymous op-ed source. Number 1, they say could be Brian Hook. He is a special envoy. He was appointed at the State Department. He was appointed by Pompeo before the election. He was a never-Trumper. And he comes out of the George W. Bush stable of cronies. The next person on their list would be Andrea Hall. She is a CIA career bureaucrat. She is an Obama holdover. She was under McMaster. And of course, McMaster has close ties to Ben Rhodes, who was the deputy NSC director under Obama. And of course, he worked for a think tank funded by Ted Turner. Andrea Hall. Next, we have Carrie Kabelka. She is a State Department White House liaison. She has worked to block Trump appointees to the State Department and has written anti-Trump memos. She, too, an Obama holdover. Get her out of there. Get them all out of there. Johnny DeStefano. He is a former aide to John Boehner. He was named the personnel director by Reince Priebus. He has worked to fill positions with former Bush people over Trump people. He has a lot to do with bringing personnel into the Trump administration. Why have you got this guy in a position whose primary role is to fill out the administration with staffers when you know his background? He worked for Boehner. He's connected to Reince Priebus. That would mean the Bushes. He's bringing former Bush people in who hate Trump. And this guy is a guy who's responsible for staffing Trump's administration. Johnny DeStefano. Get him out of there. Who are the big winners in the Kavanaugh hearings? Well, that would be Judge Kavanaugh and Trump. They are the big winners. And you can give Lindsey Graham an honorable mention. I don't like Lindsey Graham, but in the Kavanaugh hearings, he did a particularly good job, I think. So I'll give credit where credit is due. We had a couple people in the comments section wanting me to talk about that as well. So yeah, Lindsey Graham did a pretty good job on the Kavanaugh stuff and defending Trump. Who were the big losers? Well, the big losers, of course, were Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. They were the big losers. They're the ones who looked like asshats. And Cory Booker should be thrown out of the Senate. He's not a senator. He's at the very best he could be a member of the House. Senators are not supposed to be like that. He's more like someone who should have ran for the House. Senators are supposed to be more, prestigious or whatever. Cory Booker is an embarrassment. He thought that would launch his 2020 campaign, as did Kamala Harris. But the video clips that we'll have from their performance at the Kavanaugh hearings should sink them for any hope of being serious candidates in 2020, because they're ass hats. Trump telling the crowd the other night at a speech that he's considering using the military to build the wall. Why, hell yes. He can move military funding into the wall to pay for the materials, and he can order the Army Corps of Engineers to construct the wall. The Army Corps of Engineers is perfectly capable of building whatever wall Trump wants. They can build a lot of things. I was assigned to the 937th Engineer Group. I spent about a year and a half assigned to the 937th Engineer Group. I didn't actually work there too much like at headquarters, because they pretty much assigned us to headquarters, but they dispatched us out to support units. But yeah, the engineers, they can build about any damn thing. And if that's the way he has to do it, then do it. Because McConnell is now saying he should wait till after the midterms before putting the wall funding in there. Way to go, Twitch. Because what Twitch is thinking is, hopefully, if we do a good job, we'll make sure that we lose control of the House and the Democrats take over, and you'll never get wall funding from the Democrats. That's what Twitch is thinking, while he's working behind the scenes to sabotage Trump and all the rest of us. Screw you, Twitch. And you people in Kentucky, you need to kick his ass out. He's been around way too long. He's caused way too many problems. He's not on board with the Trump agenda. He's not on board to make America great again. He's not our friend. Get him out of there. The Gateway Pundit is now reporting that Joseph Misfud, the Maltese academic, one of the dossier sources, is missing and presumed dead. This based on the Democratic National Committee on Friday raising the prospect that Misfud might be dead. DNC lawyers wrote in court filings on Friday that Misfud is missing and may be deceased. The DNC says that they have been trying to serve him for months, but have not been able to locate or contact him. Now, what's this all about? This is about that silly-ass lawsuit that the DNC filed for propaganda purposes. They filed this lawsuit against the Trump administration, Roger Stone, Russia, and WikiLeaks. I thought this stupid lawsuit got dismissed. But this is what this is all about. No, Misfit is not missing and he's not dead. They just are... this is all a game. They have not tried to contact Misfit. If they do a little bit of a Google search, they'd find out exactly where he is. He's in Italy. In fact, he was just a couple of months ago at a big shindig in London. He can be found. They don't want to find him. And they don't want to hear what he has to say because it doesn't help their case. Not at all. Not at all. We're out of time. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.